welcome back to the arrays lecture. This is part 4. Swapping elements in an array. What's the output of the following program? Be very careful. So take a look at this program where we declare an array named Shirley of size or length array underscore size using a permanent constant. So if you'll notice, when Java creates an array, Java will always fill it with zeros automatically. So you get that for free. So I'm just going to fill up all of Shirley here with zeros. You assume that. Now we have an index n, which we're declaring here, and then we have a one-liner for loop here that's going to traverse the Shirley array starting at index n equals 0 and all the way through to the end, which the last element is 0 at subscript 7. And it'll fill up Shirley bracket bracket n equals 0. So it'll go through the Shirley array and fill it up with zeros, which Java actually already did for free when we declared the array. But the for loop does it all over again. Okay, then what? The next for loop, also a one-liner for loop, is going to traverse the Shirley array again, and it's going to output or print out some things. And it's going to simply print out the contents of Shirley on a single line with %2d, two space fields. So space 0, and so on until all of the contents of Shirley are printed out on the same line. Make sure I count correctly. I have trouble counting. I think that's 8 zeros there. The next line of code is just the println empty parentheses, which sends the output cursor, if you will, to the next line. Then the next for loop is going to populate the Shirley array with different values. So it's going to traverse the Shirley array and fill up each bracket bracket n with the value n. So what does this mean? Well, at Shirley bracket bracket 0, it'll now have a 0 in it, but it already did. Okay, so that didn't really change anything. When n is 1, Shirley bracket bracket 1 will contain now the value of 1, and so on. So this is simply going to traverse the entire Shirley array and put the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 into the Shirley array. And we're done with that for loop. The next for loop is going to print out all the contents of this Shirley array on one line. So space 0, space 1, and so on until all of the elements of Shirley get printed out. And then the next line of code sends our cursor, if you will, to the next line. Now, this is going to be the key for loop that this whole example is centered on. We're going to traverse the Shirley array, and we're going to set Shirley bracket bracket n equal to Shirley bracket bracket 7 minus n. So in other words, the new value of Shirley bracket bracket n will take on whatever the contents are of Shirley bracket bracket 7 minus n. This gets a little confusing, so we're going to do this very carefully. We're going to keep track of both n and 7 minus n when we do this. So up at the top here, I'll start with n equal to 0, and then what if I do it over here? N equals 0, and then 7 minus n here is 7 minus 0 is 7. Okay, so we start with the for loop when n equals 0. Shirley bracket bracket 0 is going to now equal Shirley bracket bracket 7 minus n. So the contents of Shirley bracket bracket 7, which is a 7, will now also get put into Shirley bracket bracket 0. Okay, so that's what that does, and we're done. And then we increment n. We're still in the for loop, and n is still less than the array size. 7 minus n, which we should probably calculate right now, is 6. We're going to now do Shirley bracket bracket n, which is a 1, and that's going to change and take on the contents of Shirley bracket bracket 7 minus n, which is Shirley bracket bracket 6, which has a 6 in it. So now Shirley bracket bracket 1 will now get a 6 put in there. If we increment n to a 2 now, 7 minus n is now a 5, and Shirley bracket bracket 2 will take on the contents of Shirley bracket bracket 5, which is a 5, so we'll put a 5 into Shirley bracket bracket 2. Increment n to a 3, 7 minus n is 7 minus 3, which is 4. Shirley bracket bracket 3 will take on the contents of Shirley bracket bracket 4. So that's now going to make that guy turn into a 4. N increments to a 4, 7 minus n, 7 minus 4 is a 3. So the next thing that the for loop will do, it'll change Shirley bracket bracket 4 to whatever Shirley bracket bracket 3 is. But that was already a 4, so this doesn't really change. I mean, I could cross it out and say, okay, it changes to a 4. Oh, well, not really. And then when n goes to a 5, 7 minus n is 7 minus 5, which is 2. So the new Shirley bracket bracket 5 will take on the contents of Shirley bracket bracket 2. But that's already a 5, so that location doesn't really change values. Then n increments to a 6. 7 minus 6 is 1. Shirley bracket bracket 6 will take on the contents of Shirley bracket bracket 1. But that's still a 6. And then finally, when n increments to a 7, 7 minus n is 7 minus 7, which is 0. Shirley bracket bracket 7 will take whatever the contents of Shirley bracket bracket 0 is. But that's also a 7. So we're done with that for loop. So it didn't really swap everything out. So in this last for loop, which prints out the contents of Shirley, we're going to get 7, 6, 5, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then system.out.println, go to the next line. And we're done with this example. So swapping elements in the array, did we do that? No, we didn't really do that in this example. Okay, so next up, this example, we really are going to do some swaps, but we have to be very careful when we do some swaps. So take a look. We have a new array getting declared of ints, and its length is 5, so I've already set up the subscripts for us in advance. We have two variables, n and temp, so we should probably keep track of n and temp. And the temp variable is going to be very key here, so I'm going to put a star on top of them so you'll know. So the first for loop is going to traverse the array going from subscript 0 up through subscript 4 and populate it with some numbers. The numbers array subscript n will equal n times 5. So array subscript 0 will get now set equal to 0 times 5, which is 0. When n is 1, I should probably keep track of my n. When n increments to a 1, array subscript 1 will have 1 times 5 in there, which is 5. When n is a 2, we'll have 2 times 5 at array subscript 2, and so on. I hope you can see that the contents of this array will simply have multiples of 5 in it. So 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. And we're done with that for loop. Next up, we have a pretty large looking for loop here, which you can tell by the set of curly braces surrounding the contents of the body of the for loop. We're going to start with n equals 0, but notice the second statement is going to have the conditional statement checking to see if n is less than 5 divided by 2. That's integer division. What is 5 divided by 2? Well, 2 goes into 5 twice, so 5 divided by 2 is actually equal to 2. So I'm going to write this down. 5 divided by 2 is equal to 2. So we're only going to have our second statement here is actually going to check to see if n is strictly less than 2. So if n is starting off at 0, so let's keep track of n now. N starts off at 0. 0 is less than 2, true. Do the if statement. Is array bracket bracket n, which is array bracket bracket 0, less than 10? Check. Is 0 less than 10? True. Or, now remember, in an OR statement, you only need one of the operands to be true. So this is now already true. So if we move to the next statement, what we're going to do here is we're going to put the contents of array bracket bracket 0 into the temp variable. And this is going to be what I call starting of the swap choreography. So he's going to save that value so it doesn't get deleted, because in the next line of code, after we put the value into temp, we're going to say array bracket bracket 0 is going to take on the contents of array bracket bracket 4 minus n, which in this case 4 minus 0 is 4. So in other words, this 20 will now get put into array bracket bracket 0. And then the last statement in the if is going to take the contents of temp, which has the 0 in it, and it's going to put that into the array bracket bracket 4. So array bracket 4 will now have the 0. Do you see that we actually did swap the contents of array bracket 0 with array bracket 4? And we used a temp variable to help us. If we didn't use the temp variable, we'd have a problem, because after we would replace array bracket 0 with the contents of array bracket 4, and we didn't save the value of array bracket 0 into the temp, that 0 would get deleted and we wouldn't know what used to be inside of array bracket 0. So this is the all-important swap choreography going on here. And I will refer to this as the swap choreography from now on for the rest of the semester. So know how to do this. So if we keep going, if n increments to a 1, and 1 is less than 2, so that is going to have the for loop be true. And now we check, is array bracket 1 less than 10? Well, 5 is less than 10. So we will go ahead and start the choreography going here. Temp is going to take on the contents of array bracket 1. So now we're going to save the 5 inside the temp variable so it doesn't get deleted. And then array bracket 1 will take on the contents of array bracket 4 minus 1, which is array bracket 3. So in other words, the 15 will now be saved over here at array bracket 1. And then at array bracket 3, we'll put in the temp, which is a 5. So we did swap the contents between array bracket 1 and 3. We now go ahead and increment our n to a 2, but 2 is not less than 2, so our condition is false, and we will fall through. The last thing we do in this program is simply a for loop, which traverses the array and prints out the contents of the array on the same line. So we'll print out 20, 15, 10, 5, and 0, and 2 space fields. So it looks like these will be butted up next to each other, with the exception of the last 2 values, since they only contain 1 digit. And that's it. So now you know how to swap variables legit.